James O'Brien received a surprising complaint from a listener who asked why he had not been focusing more on Nigel Farage and Reform UK, but O'Brien's response revealed his wider criticism of the party. He argued that many reform announcements generate headlines but often struggle when examined in detail, describing them as political talking points rather than fully developed policies. The debate raises a bigger question. Is reform facing genuine scrutiny, or is the media simply giving more attention to political drama than substance?
Day two of me trying not to be distracted by my inbox while I'm actually talking to you, because Keith detected yesterday when we had technical difficulties that closed down my inbox that it actually improved my concentration levels and indeed my what Keith, who's quite a fashionable young man, he described as my flow. It's my flow, which I think may be a hip-hop term. But it's day two of that, which means I check them more during the breaks now than I will while we're on air. And I can tell you, I've received a complaint from Catherine in Northumberland that is, given the normal contents of my inbox, it is almost unbelievable. I wonder if anybody can get, what is the most unlikely complaint? Or at least in terms of contradicting all the other complaints that I get. What would be the thing that Catherine could say that would make you go, flippin' heck, I never thought that day would dawn? Because that is the complaint from Catherine today. I never thought that day would dawn. And I will not only share that with you shortly, but I will also directly address the complaint that Catherine makes. It's 10 to 11, and it's time for Catherine's complaint. If you're just tuning in, I sounded a bit like Terry Wogan then. If you're just tuning in, Catherine issued a complaint to the programme half an hour ago, and I suggested that none of us ever thought the day would dawn that someone would complain about me doing what Catherine complains about me doing. I'm going to read out 3 suggested answers to you because an awful lot of people made exactly the same suggestions, but it is Ron, Ray and Frank who have risen to the top of the pile. Ron suggests, is Catherine complaining, James, that your monologues are too short? No. Ray asks, is Catherine complaining about you not talking enough, James? No. And Frank says, was Catherine complaining that you were letting someone speak for too long before you interrupted them? No, Frank, it's not that either. I think possibly it's an even more unlikely complaint than the ones that you have submitted. Here it is. This is from Catherine in Northumberland. Why isn't James O'Brien talking about Farage and Reform? Has there been an injunction? Because normally James O'Brien would have done a whole show on the Reform PIP changes and the infighting with top members and the suspension of Tim Montgomery. He would normally relish these topics. It seems like he'll talk about anything but Farage and Reform. And then a kiss and a smiley emoji to show that this is meant warmly and with love. But nonetheless, it's only Wednesday. How do you know what I'm doing now? I mean, the part of the reason I don't like talking about the policies, I'll tell you, Catherine, is because they're not policies. They are populist maypoles around which credulous people are being invited to dance. So whether it is their migration policies that fall apart before they've actually sat down and finished announcing them because all of the people that they would need to cooperate have said no, or whether it is their welfare policies announced this week without anybody pointing out, for example, if you're going to make all the unemployed people sweep the streets, then won't you be making all the people who sweep the streets unemployed? Riddle me that, Richard Tice. But if you treat them, if I do phone-in topics on these policies, then they might begin to look to some people listening like actual policies rather than populist maypoles around which credulous people are being invited to dance. So that's part of the answer to your question, Catherine. On the infighting, it's a proper little conundrum, this. I want to talk about some of the gambling stuff that is being added to the list of financial questions they really, really need to answer. And we probably should have gone in harder on the apparent lies about the police warning him to stay away from his own by-election victory announcement, which the police have made absolutely clear never happened. But the stuff about the infighting, the pomposity of this chap, Tim Montgomery, who is, I think, just a former journalist. I can't remember whether he did anything else before that. And I think we go back to the era when if you couldn't get a job on a paper, you'd set up a website. I think that's what he did. My apologies to him and to anyone who cares if I'm misremembering. And then he had a little stint on the Times, and I mean little. but didn't curry favour or produce the goods or cut the mustard or enjoy himself there. I don't know which of those choices would best. But the idea that this man's ludicrous shilly-shallying from one right-wing organisation to another is somehow national news, or the idea, Catherine, that anybody's going to be surprised that Nigel Farage can't organise a knees up in a brewery. I don't know. I just worry sometimes that if I draw attention to stuff that would matter if it was happening in a different political party, then people might forget that this is not a proper political party. It's a vanity project. It's an ego trip. It's a grift. It's whatever you want to call an organisation that welcomes 30p Lee Anderson into its fold as some sort of intellectual or political titan. So, yeah, there are bits I will talk about, but I don't really see the point in insulting my listeners by asking them if they have substantive, cogent opinions about policies that are neither substantive nor cogent. It would be a bit like me asking you, Nigel Farage has announced his intention to nail jelly to a wall. Do you think this will work? And do you welcome this intervention? I hope that answers your question, Catherine. But anyway, that is a complaint I never thought I'd see. Now I've seen it. Earlier today, Catherine in Northumberland wrote, why isn't James O'Brien talking about Farage and Reform? Has there been an injunction? Because normally James O'Brien would have done a whole show on the Reform PIP changes and the infighting with top members and the suspension of Tim Montgomery. He would normally relish these topics. It seems he'll talk about anything but Farage and Reform these days. I get about 100 complaints a day from people who say that I talk about it too much, which obviously I don't. But that is the first and quite possibly the last complaint I will ever receive about not talking enough about the shenanigans and the question marks and the absurdity and the appalling conduct of members of said party.
And we've got the answer, haven't we? We know the answer to why you haven't done.
There's been quite a lot going on.
Well, I would just say that it's because Henry Riley's on drive this week.
Well, also Henry Riley is on drive, but the main reason is because I've explained earlier, I struggle to walk the tightrope between treating policies that fall apart on scrutiny with scrutiny. But that's not actually why you're here. You're addressing Catherine's point about the infighting first.
Yeah, that's right. And there has been a lot of infighting behind the scenes. As far as I can read and tell it, Reform will insist that that's not the case. But it absolutely, according to the least of people that I'm speaking to, it seems to be. The Reform Party, as you know, James, have probably not had a fantastic summer. The scrutiny over Nigel Farage has become more intense in recent months, including over those donations, those gifts, whether they were properly declared. Back in June, I think it was fair to say that the scale of his irritation over these questions became clear in this interview with LBC.
With all due respect, what's it got to do with you?
Well, because it speaks to the position of you hold in office. Initially, we were told that it was because of your personal security and it would pay for that for the rest of your life. Then apparently It was some kind of reward for campaigning for Brexit. I am told we have two different stories. Which is the truth?
Well, I think you're contradicting yourself there, aren't you?
Well, if you tell me what happened with the £5 million, then we're solved.
It's an unconditional gift. I can spend it on Ferraris if I want. That'd be entirely up to me.
Why did you say it was for personal security then?
Because it was given as an unconditional gift, right? The understanding is, and you know very well, I've been physically more attacked over many years than any other politician.
I've been with you when you've been abused. I've seen that. But my listeners want to know, Mr. Farage, how much has been spent?
Nick, I can deal with it as I want. I can do what I want with it. I can put it on the horses.
What did you do at school? Because we would go, at that point, ooh, smell the cheese. Did you do smell the cheese?
No,
what did you do? Did you do anything?
No, I don't.
Just an ooh?
Just an ooh.
No,
I can't think
ooh, smell
what
the
does
cheese.
that mean?
I've no idea why we did it,
I've
but
missed
on
the
we go.
here.
But
yes, you could tell that he was starting to get upset by some of those questions, and it was on other broadcasters as well, that he really showed that he was getting a bit rattled by all of this. He then called, of course, the Clacton by-election, which he, of course, won, but he was embarrassed, and he did admit in an interview with a newspaper that he did not expect all of the other political parties to pull out, resulting in him having to fight no one other than a bin. It's
a little unfair on the 32 other novels.
Sorry, none other than a bin. A bin plus other 15 candidates or so. And the party have also had a bit of a dip in the polls. Labour have had a bit of a burn and bounce. The Tories have had a little bit of a gains. Reform have been trying to get on the on the front foot with a string of announcements in the last few weeks to try to grab back the attention of voters and the media. They talked about sending in the Navy to tackle small boats, the banning foreign citizens from claiming welfare, and promising to expand prison capacity and keep more people behind bars. But last week, this really exploded into quite a public row on social media. The former Defence Secretary and former Prisons Minister Ben Wallace put on social media a series of questions on this prisons announcement and how they would do that. Zia Youssef, who is the party's Home Affairs spokesman, tweeted back to say, "It was incredible that this moron is Defence Secretary. Our policy is in direct response to your failures." He also called him a traitor. LBC also spoke with Sir Ben Wallace after those remarks.
I don't care about being called a moron. I do care about being called a traitor, which you missed out from his quote. He called me a traitor.
Yes, he did.
Called lots of people traitors. And traitor is a very loaded charge. Traitor carries, by history, a death sentence. And this is a man who, a few weeks ago, was telling people to modify their language after the tragic murder of Anne Widdecombe, and spouts this stuff. I also think it's a bit cheeky. This is a guy who's an American banker, for God's sake. Never put a uniform on in his life. I spent 9 years of my life on operational tours and in uniform. And
just for the record, I don't mind being called a moron either. If you don't understand that reference, hopefully you will before the end of the programme. Wallace, of course, a former military officer.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what Zia Youssef's background is. Looking at him, I presume he was either a supply teacher or a banker.
He definitely worked in finance, as far as I'm aware. But yes, that really caused a total spat from within the Reform Party. Nigel Farage publicly then distanced himself from those remarks. He said this was a bit over the top. He stated he would give Zia Youssef a ticking off. But despite that, the social media post remained up. But that really sparked, I think, James, some discussion within the party. Lots of people think that just went too far. At a press conference earlier this week, Richard Tice earlier laughed off suggestions of a rift in the party.
Do you think Nigel Farage or others within Reform are running out of patience with your Home Affairs spokesperson, Zia Youssef?
Honestly, no is the answer. Zia's doing a brilliant job. He gave a fantastic press conference last week. And, I mean, I know it's August and people are a bit short of stories, but it's best not to make things up.
And the person who is today in the firing line is a man called Tim Montgomery. He used to run the Conservative Home website. He defected to the Reform Party. He's now been suspended as a member by the Reform Party for seemingly a lot of criticism of the party, including last week.
You must have got this wrong, because they're the party of free speech.
I have heard that too. But apparently not so for the man who apparently was, until recently, working with them to do a spin-off of Conservative Home, essentially Reform Home, a website where they could discuss ideas, people could write.
Which is what he does. I mean,
which is what he does. He's a commentator.
Yeah, and previously a speechwriter, I think, for Dunkin' Donuts or William Hague, or possibly both of them. And then in one of those think tanks that we learned so much about. And then, as you say, set up a website. And some people in that era, 2005, were setting up websites because they couldn't get proper jobs in journalism. I've no idea whether that applies to him. Then he had a little go at the Times, I think, as comment editor, and not for long. So if this was a left-wing figure, we would not know his name. He would be a cipher. He would be a punctuation mark upon the history of the political party that he was working for. But I opened the Daily Telegraph today, and it's the page lead on page 4.
Are you saying slightly over-egged?
Just a little bit.
Maybe.
Yes. And also, what a pompous man, the way he speaks about, I'm going to stay in the party, and I'm this, that, and the other. Who is he? Yeah,
like you say, we've sort of just outlined his sort of vague background. Many people, though, on the right saw his defection to the Conservative Party as a real shift of the idea that the Conservative Party, as we knew it, might be dead. Yeah.
So it's someone who bestows a veneer of respectability because he used to be involved in a proper political party.
Exactly. So him, people like Jake Berry, people like sort of those people that were in Danny Kruger as well, big parts of the Conservative Party that then defected over to Reform.
So what they're saying is,
who they are, what they represent.
We might have 30p Lee on the roster and Richard Tice, but look, we've also got these guys, and they sound credible, as if they went to school.
Exactly, they're credible figures according to some in the right who make the party, they say, more credible. But Zia Youssef is on the other side of that bandwagon. He says, and he actually put a message on social media today saying, isn't it funny that these people who will have the words right honourable in their title are some of the least honourable people in society? party. So a clear hit at those people who are those former Tories, former people that were at the top levels of government. And it does seem like Tim Montgomery is very much like the sort of wedge of this. He's been now suspended. He did this interview with The Spectator this week where he said that Zia Youssef is not a team player.
There are a lot of people who are on no speaking terms with Zia, and it's nearly always Zia who initiates this. It needs to end. You cannot behave like a child in politics. You cannot have litmus tests, on so many litmus tests where you stop talking to people. And I genuinely pay tribute to what Zia, like I've mentioned, how brilliant he was on the vetting thing. He made the party organisation work. He has so many qualities, but he has to be a team player.
A team player. Well, on we go. Thank you very much. Shall I just reveal why I thought it was important to stress? Did you hear Ben Wallace saying he doesn't mind being called a moron?
Yes, I don't mind being called a moron.
No, well, just for the record, I don't mind being called a moron either.
That was that moron O'Brien that comes on this channel after you.
The growing tensions inside Reform UK have raised questions about the party's unity and leadership. With public disagreements between senior figures, criticism from former allies, and internal disputes becoming headlines, opponents argue that the party is struggling to maintain the image of a disciplined political alternative. As Reform continues to grow in attention, the challenge now is whether it can move beyond controversy and prove it has the organization and policies needed to govern.